Hey everybody, Blue here, and I'm bringing you our deck profile for Yugi's deck from the Kaiba Corp Grand Championship Tournament. This tournament saw a bunch of elite duelists all compete together in order for a chance to duel Yugi for the title of King of Games. So Yugi's deck for his, this duel we saw with Leon, he played a lot of the same cards we saw before, a couple new things, but like the other characters from this story arc, Grand Championship was only one story arc within Season 5, whereas Battle City was actually, a season and a half long. So these characters have duplicates of a lot of cards. We could not build them each individual 40 card decks, but that being said, with Yugi's deck, there's a couple throw-ins to give the deck a bit of flavor, but while also duplicating a couple cards that we felt were more prevalent, and stuff that that was a bit more accented in these duels. So like the Joey and the Kaiba decks we've also just put out, each deck has a bit of a spin on the usual decks in that there was, a little bit of a theme we felt that was more so present, where we tried to push more. And again, if you haven't heard by now, Konami has announced that they will be printing cards relatively soon that were played by Siegfried and by Leon. Now at the same time though, Delta and I are retiring from the channel. Circumstances are preventing us from really continuing on the way we want to. So while we make no promises, we do hope one day to be able to put together a deck profile for Leon, for Siegfried when those characters come out, because those are the characters we've been really would love to have built, we've been wanting to build, we have been asked to build them, and the timing is unfortunate. But that being said, there is no accompanying duel for this deck. It is just a deck profile, and a few more decks will be released as exclusively deck lists in our deck list document, where you can also find this deck and all of our decks. All of our decks you've ever built will be in that deck list document in the description of this video and all our videos. This is just one of a small handful of decks. We are deck profiling, but we'll have no duels, and all the other decks that we've had over the years, you can find lists, you can find deck profiles, and usually at least one duel. So I'll get into this now. I know we've been kind of going on. Just a couple footnotes I want to go over. So starting up is, of course, Crystal Dragon, as you saw. It's been in and out of his deck a lot. Dark Magician, Gazelle, Giant Soldier. So 2 Jax Knights. So the Knights were something that we doubled up on because they were a bit more prevalent in this season, or in the story arc for him, including his Royal Straight Slasher, which I'll touch on later. It is not a printed card, but I do want to address that a little bit later on. So the Kaiba deck from Grand Championship that we built and just debuted, that has duplicates of all the XYZ monsters, so Kaiba can push the XYZ strategy a bit. Yugi will counter with the Knights a bit more, because the Knights had that, swarm ability. Now, of course, it's the anime, so it's not a strong swarm, Baphomet, as it is, say, in certain competitive. And then the Big Shield Guard. So again, it's a lot of the same Yugi cards, very little new. Buster Blader being one of his strong Trump monsters. Dark Magician Girl. 2 King's Knight. Karibo. 1 Obnoxious Hildegarde. 1 Old Vindictive Magician. And again, this deck, while we try to avoid it, does include a few cards that were seen or shown in places during the duel, but not specifically played. Again, we wanted to help round out the deck a little bit, not make it exclusively duplicates of cards that were played, but again, not try and throw in too many cards that we didn't actually see get to come out. 2 Skill Dark Magician. So in addition to pushing the Knights a bit more, there was also that Dark Magician Buster Blader engine that ran a bit heavier as well. So Dark Paladin made its debut in Battle City, and arguably I think this deck capped on that a little bit more to make it more consistent and more effective. The last monster is Wadapon. So the Grand Championship Tournament, the prize was to duel Yugi, and making things fair, the God cards were prohibited. So of course there is no Slifer, Obelisk, or Ra in this deck, although Yugi possessed them at the time. They were not allowed to be used. So we have abided by that, such that this deck will not have those. But the option is always there to add them in anyway, if you wanted to build his deck from, say, this time period, but minus the tournament. So next up is Card of Sanctity. For any of you not familiar with the way we do duels, we do a handful of cards, and we play them with the anime effect in instances where the anime effect we feel differs significantly in such a way that, you know, that the deck would really be hurt, or certain key moments would be affected by not having an anime style effect. And one of those notable ones, of course, was Card of Sanctity. It allowed both players to draw up to 6 cards. This made a lot of plays possible for Yugi when he played off it, or any character who played off it, because it really gave them a whole new hand to work with. So likewise, we make sure that when we play this card in any of our duels, it's the draw up to 6 effect. That is, you know, almost necessary for the character deck dueling versus competitive play, where of course it has to be nerfed. Diffusion Wave Motion. So again, to go with that Dark Paladin strategy, Diffusion Wave Motion really makes this combo. Now, of course, one card that's missing from that combo that is not printed yet, despite having been used, you know, certainly a handful of times over the years in Yugi's duels, was Necromancy, which worked by allowing him to summon monsters from his opponent's graveyard to his opponent's field, and with a couple more things. I mean, that really helped him with Diffusion Wave Motion. So you can look more at that online, but that was basic. That was one of his really wombo combos, I guess, was Dark Paladin, Diffusion Wave Motion, Necromancy. Two-Dimension Hole. Now, if you look from the anime, Dimension Hole was not played by name. It was actually called Time Travel. But if you follow the link on the wiki for Time Travel, you get to Dimension Hole, because the anime is weird. But Dimension Hole is a great card, and actually not too dissimilar from Kaiba's Interdimensional Mana Transporter that he's been playing around. Likewise, Dimension Hole is a card that's made an appearance in Duke's deck. So this is a card that has actually been kind of, or a style of, you know, effect that has been bouncing around for some time. So although it's new for a Yugi deck, it is definitely not new for this channel for character decks. 2, Emblem of Dragon Destroyer. 2 Emergency Provisions. 1 Monster Reborn. 2 Monster Reincarnation. So, alright, Yugi's deck definitely has quite a few ways to get back his monsters, but this will allow him to reuse some of the strategies, especially when he's trying to swarm with the knights. Next up is Multiply. So another one of our errata cards, and this is actually for a very key moment. In the anime, Multiply could be used on any fiend that was low attack points, I believe it was 500 or less. And this was really for that, the duel with Merrick, he could use it on Fiend Sanctuary and then tribute those as well to summon Obelisk, which is similar to a play that happened in our most recent Yugi versus Merrick duel, where this card was able to provide that effect. So you can find formal descriptions and, you know, effects of all our erratas in our errata document in this description. And again, I say formal because we really went through and wrote them as if they were a Konami effect instead of just kind of summarizing it like we do in deck profiles. So definitely check that out. But yeah, so basically Multiply works on fiends, which doesn't really apply to this deck, but again, if it's in one of our decks, it's in all of our decks, whether or not the effect actually applies. We don't use different version effects of different cards. Two copies of Polymerization. So this will be important for Yugi's fusions, which again I'm going to touch on more when we get there, because there's one very interesting thing we're bringing to this deck. But 2 Polymerizations. 1 Pot of Greed, and that finishes up the spell lineup. So far, most of the deck has really been monsters and spells. The last 5 cards are trap cards. Chain Destruction. So the trap card lineup does have a few cards that weren't played at all in the story arc. So I will admit that the traps where we took a little bit of creativity, pulling from Yugi's cards in the past. So first up is Dark Renewal. Now, what Yugi did play in the story arc, that of course is another card that we do not have printed yet, was Dark Magic Retribution. So they are two different cards, but they were both trap cards that brought back a magician, and the point was that they do so conditionally. It's not a monster born. It's that, at least in this case, certain things have to happen to trigger that summon back. So again, they are different cards, but we wanted to throw in a little bit more of the spellcaster support and a way to help bring back Dark Magician, but not strictly just the monster born. Another one of our erratas is magical hats. So in the anime, there's 4 hats. On the card art, there's 4 hats. In the effect, there's 3 hats. So to remedy this, actually is one of our cleanest erratas to date, I'd say, is that the actual hats card we use as the 4th hat or the 4th face down card. So this changes nothing about the effect. You're still only taking 2 cards from the deck. You're not changing that. It's still 1 monster, but you have an extra target. So like the anime. But unlike the anime, we did not use any hidden trap cards like Yugi was able to do. We felt that was, well, really awesome, a bit much. The last 2 cards being Yugi's classic staple Mirror Force, although it did miss out on Battle City. And lastly, an inclusion of Hour's Spellbinding Circle. So, yes, not one of the trap cards Yugi played, but an ever-handy, faithful card of his. So, to round out his defensive traps, we did throw that in there. But as you've seen, the deck is almost entirely cards that were played during the Grand Prix story arc. So, there are 3 fusions for this deck. 1, Chimera the Flying Mythical Beast. 2, Dark Paladin. So we're up to 2 polymerizations, 2 fusion targets. Here's your 3rd one, and I will preface this that this is absolutely optional at your discretion. I'll tell you why we put it in the deck. It may not be hard to figure out, but if you feel that this absolutely is a sin against the deck, then you are more than welcome to exclude it. I'm noting it that this card's conclusion may be controversial. Arcana Knight Joker absolutely was not played by Yugi. However, he did have, of course, Royal Straight Slasher, which also had Royal Straight as a spell card to summon it. It was an effect monster. This is just a fusion monster. Now, the idea behind both is that each of them relies on those 3 knights and kind of takes them and amplifies them a bit. You know, Royal Straight Slasher had different effects, different stats, and ultimately is what helped Yugi triumph over Golden Castle Stromberg. And while it definitely has a massive attack stat, we still want to give the representation to the knights and the part that they played, and that they had a bigger boss monster. So again, Kaiba has more of the XYZs in his deck, and to help him work on his XYZ Dragon Cannon, we want to make sure that Yugi was able to have more of the knights for their swarm ability that he was using, but also them to have their own kind of boss for it. So this is really just us trying to fill the hole of Royal Straight Slasher by some means, but definitely not, you know, an exact means. It's really just a King's Knight, Queen's Knight, Jack's Knight boss. But this is our deck for Yugi from Grand Championship. Again, you can catch the Kaiba and the Joey that were just released as well, and the Rebecca from a long time ago. That one came out early because we wanted to have a new character, and we still had a few Yugi and Kaiba decks to tackle before we got to closing out this. But with this Yugi deck done, with the other 2 that I just mentioned done, and the My Wicked and the Dragons deck, we've built just about every deck that we had planned to from the original series, barring any decks that have now been announced. So this really concludes what Delta have spent years doing, which is, despite how many seasons and different series from the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, we would say that with this deck, we have, until new cards are printed, we have concluded the first series of Yu-Gi-Oh! We've built nearly every deck, a few handful of characters that have not come out, had very small roles, had very few cards, but overall, our library now includes a very extensive collection of minor characters, major characters, season by season, from the first and original series of Yu-Gi-Oh! So stay tuned for our last few announcements, our big wrap-up video, maybe anything to come in the future, but you guys have been awesome fans, and we will see you